Great. Good morning, everyone. This is Messy Strategy, Solving Organizational Paralysis. Welcome to our webinar this morning. My name is Ashley Bowers. A couple of housekeeping. We will be recording today's webinar, and within the next 24 to 48 hours, you'll receive the recording as well as the additional handouts that we'll be going through during our time together today. So no worries on any of the handouts. If you've had a chance to download those, that's great. If not, you will find a couple of them available in your panel under the handouts section, but we will also be emailing them out with all of the follow-up. During today's webinar, because we are recording, we're going to go ahead and keep you in listen-only mode. And so during any time you have a question or anything like that, feel free to use your question panel through the GoToWebinar access point. So again, Messy Strategy, Solving Organizational Paralysis. My name is Ashley Bowers. I'm Chief Strategy Officer here at TTI Success Insights. And this is a movement that I've kind of founded over the last few years, working with organizations of 10 people up to 1,000 people, organizations that are startups financially up to $380 million, and really working with their senior leadership team on how to create a strategy that's not only going to take the organization where they want to go in the future, but is also going to align every single individual in the organization and create a culture of execution. Planning is a phenomenal process. The execution is really where most people get stuck, and I actually believe that's because of our planning processes. So I'm really looking forward to discovering with you today what Messy Strategy is and giving you some very specific techniques that you can use inside your organization as we launch this fourth quarter and the time of planning for all businesses. So let's start with, what is Messy Strategy? The name Messy Strategy started from a viewpoint of the process. Creative processes by nature are not neat and tidy. They're messy. They're supposed to be messy. That's how you get in and you play. And as kids, we do this really well. And as adults, we do less and less of this. But I believe in order to create the right strategic plan, you have to get messy and you have to play. Strategic processes have become very rigid and controlled, and that naturally kills those creative juices during that process and during your time together. Messy Strategy is really about inspiring dialogue, creativity, and innovation. And it provides you a framework to walk your team through the journey of taking all of the mess and building an operational or a strategic plan that's actually executable. Building something that every single person in the organization can align to, and most importantly, they can see themselves in. And I'm talking from your most senior executive down to your absolute front line. This execution can become streamlined and neat, which allows the entire organization to follow one path toward the vision. When we work with organizations, most leaders inside an organization, they all have the same goal in mind. They have the same vision. That's actually pretty common. They might describe it a little differently. It might mean some different things. But ultimately, if you look at the nuts and bolts of what they're all saying the same thing. Where that falls apart is they all have very different paths and how they want to lead the organization toward that vision. Well-intended, great ideas, and oftentimes any of the paths would actually work. The challenge becomes when you have a team of people underneath you that are trying to decide which path to take. And if you have leaders on different paths, you have team members hopping from one path to another more than executing towards the vision. So Messy Strategy is really about aligning towards that one path. But why is this important? Why is it important now? I think we can all agree organizational chaos is at an all-time high. We're seeing growth, but we have the lowest unemployment rates in our history. And then the economy is booming, but at the same time, we're highly concerned and unsure about our future. It's almost like we're in this performance vortex that has everyone paralyzed in our decision process. So we have a workforce that wants to contribute, and they want to understand how they can impact long-term goals. They want to understand why their position is important within the organizations in which they work. It's no longer okay for them just to go in and clock in and collect a paycheck and just do the tasks that are put before them. They need to know why. We spend so much of our time at work, whether we're working in an office or virtually. We spend so much of our headspace in work, whether we're actually on the clock or off the clock. So we have to make sure that we're connecting the importance of what we do, from answering the phone or taking out the trash, to deciding to take an organization public or do an acquisition. Every single role and every single task in the organization needs to really be connected to that goal. Leadership in organizations are so unsure about the future right now that it makes it more difficult to sit down with employees and be transparent and be vulnerable and talk about the concerns and really lean into those employees and work with them through that strategy. I feel like now it's more important for us to do that than ever. Messy strategy really allows for bottom-up information, but top-down confidence. And I just want to put a pin in that for a moment. It allows leaderships to facilitate the accomplishment of goals at all levels. Because through this process that I'm about to take you through, we really listen to the voice of each and every employee inside the organization. We take that voice and we put it into tangible outcomes. And then that provides the confidence for the leadership team to be able to move forward, to be able to empower managers and supervisors and employees within the organization to execute towards that vision each and every single day that they're in the office. And that's really important for us to get through this vortex of performance that we're all experiencing right now. So with that, I really want to go ahead and start by breaking down the messy strategy process and outline what that's going to look like. Before we jump into it, I want to just preview the 7 messy techniques that we're going to explain to you throughout the next 40 minutes that we're together. Throughout the process breakdown, I'd like you to look for these different items. And during the second half of the webinar, I'm going to give you actionable things that you can do for each of these 7 messy techniques that you can actually go and deploy in your organization tomorrow. These are things you can do with or without assistance from outside facilitators and really help you be the leader inside your organization to move your whole company through this performance vortex. So real quick, making the process fit with your organization, plan for planning, which sounds a little silly. We'll discover more about that in a bit. Giving voice to your entire organization, which we've already touched on and we'll dig into deeper. Understanding the behaviors your organization needs to stop, start, and continue. Just like you would with an employee on a performance plan, organizations need to be on a performance plan. You really need to start with what needs to be done, and you need to end with critical numbers. I'm going to take the typical strategic planning process and completely flip it upside down for you, and that's one of the biggest pieces. But then finally, you need to get excited. You need to get excited about your plan, and you need to make that plan presentation really special for every single person that's in your organization because you need them to connect with it. Again, we're trying to have a bottom-up information type of organization, but we're trying to build confidence in you and give you tools to help you display that confidence to the rest of the organization. And finally, throughout the year, you need to set a cadence of connection with your teams, and you need to make sure that you're following that cadence without fail. The consistency and the commitment to keeping your teams informed is one of the single keys to success to any strategic plan. So let's go ahead and jump into the process, but keep an eye out for all of these techniques. So messy strategy has 4 non-negotiable rules, if you will. When I look at the entire process and when it works inside organizations and when it fails, there are 4 themes that come to mind. The first one, blending models to create a language that resonates all the way through your organization. A gentleman by the name of Ron Price, I had the fortunate experience to watch him on a keynote years back. And he was talking about leadership models and business models. And within that, he talked about how all models are useful, but all models are broken. And that's what I really mean here by blending models. It's really easy to get caught up in best practice syndrome and read the next best book that came out on how to execute inside your organization and take a hard left or a hard right turn from your current processes. And that can be very scary and unsettling for your entire team. So what you really want to do is look at blending different models that resonate with you and resonate with the entire organization. You need to build a language within those models that your frontline employees would use in their everyday conversations, not just something they can regurgitate because they heard it in a staff meeting. So we'll talk a little bit about a few different models as we go through the process. You want to create a cadence of accountability that drives execution and employee engagement. You want to make sure that that accountability is just as much on you and your leadership team as it is on the rest of the employees in the organization. It needs to be about achieving goals together as a team, so you're winning together and you're losing together. You're going to have the team rally around you when you don't quite meet the goal, and then you're going to have the team celebrate when the goals are achieved or exceeded. You need to really understand your delivery tools and your methods that connect the strategic plan to all levels of the staff in order to drive that execution. And you'll hear me say it several times today, keep it tangible. Taking everything you do during a strategic process and throwing it into a software system is not the way to drive execution in your organization. People are starving to touch and feel processes and things inside companies because everything is going online. This is one area where I really, really recommend that you keep it tangible and you let them touch and feel the entire process and entire outcome of your strategic planning event. As we go through that, you'll see in one of your handouts, you actually have a template for an operational plan, which we'll talk to in just a moment, but that's one of your key ways to make it tangible. Finally, you really need to make strategy a process inside your organization, not just a fourth quarter event. So often the year goes something like this. Everyone comes out of strategy, super excited. The first quarter after strategy, everything's getting done. Everyone's talking about the plan. The second quarter, there's still a lot of excitement, but not quite as much as getting done. Maybe a couple things have slipped. Maybe a cadence of connection isn't being followed. By third quarter, you're kind of in that slump. It's been going too fast for too long. Things are starting to pause. And then fourth quarter becomes all about hitting the numbers for the end of the year. And there's this roller coaster that you, your teams, and your staff all go through that really isn't necessary and it's not productive. And so by making strategy a process inside the organization that you're constantly keeping alive through your cadence of connection, you can avoid those peaks and valleys of performance and stress. As we look at the models, a few models that I tend to lean on during this process are Verne Harnish Rockefeller Habits or Scaling Up, whichever your preference. 4 disciplines of execution, although I've modified a lot of the language from wars and battles to strategic movements and key projects. And then finally, our stages of growth model, which we'll talk quite a bit about as we go through the next couple of moments. So let's get into the process. So again, as I mentioned earlier, I'm going to kind of turn the process upside down. The messy strategy process does not start by what it is that you want to achieve. It starts by listening to your entire organization, and we do that through feedback surveys. The first thing that we recommend that you do is that you do a strategic workshop with the leaders that are going to be involved in the process. You want them to understand what the process is going to look like, what kind of questions are in the different surveys, how the survey data is going to be used, and finally what the outcomes are going to look and feel like by the time you get through the entire process. This is important because inevitably you have new leaders on the team. Someone's been promoted from within or hired from outside. And so you want to make sure that the entire team is going into the strategic process on the same page. But also, as you start to solicit feedback from the team members, they're going to ask leadership questions. They're going to go to people who they feel very comfortable with, and they're going to want to know how that information is being used. And you want to make sure that the team that's involved in the process is highly aware of exactly what's going to go on with all that data so they can answer in a very transparent and authentic way. So we have different levels of surveys that you would send out after the strategic workshop. The first is an organizational survey, and that's really going to look at how does the organization feel overall? How do they feel things are going? How do they live the core values, the mission, the vision, and having them put that in their own words. You're not looking for them to copy it off of a poster that's on the wall or something they received during orientation. You really want them to put it into their own words and how they feel about the company. My favorite question to ask the entire organization is if you could change one thing, what would it be? Think about that. As leaders in companies, how valuable is that information from all of your staff members, whether it's 10, 100, or 1,000? What one thing would they like to see changed about your organization? We also asked the employee net promoter score during this survey. On a scale of 1 to 10, how likely are you to refer an employee to work here? I always follow that question up with why did you give that answer? Every once in a while, you'll get a reason around, I don't want competition for my job or something like that. And so it's probably not a valid response. But most often, you'll get even more information about what you need to improve in the organization. And on the flip side of that, you'll get information that you want to add to your recruiting efforts as like the best reasons as to why to work at the organization. So you get a lot of information just from that one question. And then obviously your employee net promoter score is a leading indicator to your customer net promoter score. And so you can really see what's going on with your customer base and maybe attribute anything with customer attrition or customer retention that you have going on in the organization. The next step, if you go to the top of the screen into the yellow bubble, you're going to do a previous year review. So you're going to look at what did we do last year, what did we get done, and this is usually just right before you get into planning. You want to have a good base for what was accomplished, how many projects were able to be completed, were they on time, were they behind, what was the stress levels. And so you're not really measuring this from a did we achieve our goals standpoint. You're measuring this from what's really feasible for us to do again this year from an amount of work or stretching goals perspective. The next thing you're going to do is send out the Stages of Growth X-ray. So this is another model that we have here at TTI Success Insights that has a battery of assessments that go along with it. And so it's going to just go to the people who are involved in the process. This one does not go into your entire team. But this is based on the work of Dr. James Fisher, and the work has been furthered by Lori Taylor of Flashpoint. And through our partnership, we are able to bring this into this type of process so that you can use a model for how things should really work inside an organization. The model is based on organizations of up to 500 employees or small businesses. And the goal behind the author of the model was really to change the statistic of how small businesses fail. 20% of small businesses fail in the first 5 years, and those that succeed, 20% of those fail in the next 5. So what we want you to really look at with that is what should I be doing and what should I be doing next? So if I have 10 employees today, what are my challenges? If I'm planning on having 35 employees, next year, what will my challenges be? So it really can allow you to predict the problems that are going to go on in your organization, and it's all based on complexity. And in that model, complexity is specifically defined by the number of people in the organization. So that's a great tool for your leadership team to go through and bring into the deep dive. So then we go to that gray bubble, the executive team deep dive. During that aspect of the process, you're really going to be going through every single piece of feedback. Yes, and we'll talk about this a little bit more, but you're going to read every answer to every question. Last year, I had an organization with 150 employees, and we had 163 pages of feedback. And yes, it took us a couple of days to get through all the feedback, but by the end, we had initiatives, key projects, behaviors that we need to stop, start, continue. We really had an operational plan to take the organization to the next level. In conjunction with that executive team deep dive, then you have your strategic team deep dive, and that's really where you go through your stages of growth information. So those are all the people that are reporting into the president or CEO that really have financial knowledge and business operations knowledge of the entire organization. Again, you're going to come up with a lot of information, a lot of sticky notes as to what needs to be done in the organization that year. Then finally, you take all of that information into your financial and your resource planning. And this is where it's kind of upside down. Most organizations start with, we want to increase our revenue by X%. We want to increase our profit by Y%. That's not what we're looking to do here. We're looking to see what are all the things that need to be done, and if we do those things, what type of increase can we actually achieve? What you're going to find is the goals will get larger and larger the more you go through this process, because people feel so empowered by the end of the process that they really start to set very stretching goals, and they really push themselves to achieve things that they previously wouldn't have thought they were able to achieve. So more often than not, the goals are actually higher than what you would have set if you would have started with them in the beginning. Once you get through all the resource planning and the financial planning, then you take all that information and you put it into the operational plan. And we'll do a little bit of a deeper dive as we go through our webinar today on what that operational plan looks and feels like. Let's talk a little bit about the feedback. The feedback and executive team deep dive. Some really important pieces with this. Consistency of your surveys. And you can use, Google Forms as your surveys, SurveyMonkey, there's a lot of tools out there. But just be consistent with the questions that you ask. There's a couple of reasons for that. One, you're going to look for trends year after year. And I suggest you do your annual surveys as well as little quarterly check-in surveys that maybe aren't so detailed. The looking for trends of, are there seasons where the company's more stressed? Are there seasons where they're more laxed? Are there departments that have different things going on? You really want to be able to compare year to year and quarter to quarter to see what's happening inside your organization. The other thing is you're onboarding senior leaders. When you're bringing in senior executives into an organization from the outside, they really want to make their mark. And they want to prove that it was a great decision in hiring them and that they're there to contribute and that your money is well spent. But sometimes that well-intended senior executive can wreak a little havoc as they start to go into the organization because they have fresh eyes. So they're seeing new things that need to be quote unquote fixed and changed. But what they don't see is the years of progress that they've made previously. And so by having all the survey data, you can actually utilize it to onboard senior leaders. Show the progression of the organization, show the plan, how you got to the plan, and really make them become a part of the organization from day one so that they can contribute instantly, but they also have that appreciation so that they can melt into the team in addition to making that contribution. Reading each and every answer. I have this done inside the meeting. I have tried it where everyone reads the information and comes to the meeting, and it's just not as effective. The way in which people react and respond and go through the process inside the meeting is very different than if they read the feedback outside the meeting and come to it with preconceived ideas as to what we should do. So reading each and every answer. As you go through that process, capturing stop, start, continues, and initiatives. I have flip charts all over the room of stop, starts, continues, both for the organization as well as for each department. And then we have large sticky notes of initiatives and things. And so it's really building everything you're going to do as you go through the feedback. People always say, we're going to do a day of reading answers. Yes, you're reading answers for that day, but you are capturing so much information about what you need to do in your organization. There's really no other time that's more valuable for you during your year. And then finally, the organizational diagnostic x-ray. So we talked a little bit about that model with the stages of growth. And just as a sample here, you'll see our 27 challenges. This is one of the 4 assessments that an organization looks at when they're doing the stages of growth x-ray. And if you find yourself on the total number of staff line, kind of the one just underneath the colored bar, and you look at how many employees you have. So if you are a stage 4 organization with 35 to 57 employees, the model predicts that some of the challenges you might be facing, if you go down in that column, is weak project management, difficulty diagnosing problems, employee turnover, systems development, and that your organization may be uninformed about growth plans in the future. So take a moment and kind of find where you are and look at those challenges and see how those might resonate with you and your organization today. In the follow-up that I mentioned at the beginning of the webinar today, we're actually going to send you a link where you can assess your organization on these 27 challenges to see how they line up to the model. At the end, through all of this process, what you're really trying to create is strategic alignment with complete buy-in. Okay, that's what every organization needs. That's what every organization wants. They really want to make sure that they have that buy-in and you're not having to go sell the process. If we're really honest with ourselves, the rest of the organization, when leadership comes out of strategic planning, they're like, oh no, here they come again. They're going to have all these ideas. We're getting all of this work. And ultimately, they feel like all we're doing is putting more money in the stockholders' pockets or the owner's pocket. So you want to change that. And you don't want to spend the first 3 months after strategic planning when you're super excited and your leadership team is super excited, creating buy-in with the rest of the organization. By implementing messy strategy and doing it from the bottom up, you eliminate the entire buy-in process because as they look through the outputs, they see themselves in it and it's instant buy-in right when you do that plan. But this is where the operational plan becomes very important. You've got to keep it real. You've got to keep it tangible. Okay, it should be considered an employee playbook for your organization. I like actually putting it in binders and separating out a goals at a glance tab versus the full operational plan, And then I have tabs for our staff meetings, department meetings, and monthly one-on-one meetings with each team member that they have with their manager, whether you do them monthly, every other week, or weekly. But it really becomes their playbook for how they perform in the organization for the entire year. That's the buy-in. That's where the magic actually happens. But what's important is not just to put the goals and the objectives that we're going to achieve as a company, but keep the what's in it for me aspect for the employee. The holiday schedule for that upcoming year. How are you going to measure their performance? What type of professional development or continuing education are you going to offer them? Any changes to employee-related policies? Your employee relations plan for the year. And it really doesn't matter if it's 10 employees or 1,000 employees. These things are important to humans. And that's what we really need to focus on. So it needs to be that two-way relationship. If as an organization we accomplish these things, and as an organization we give these things to you as employees, so the employees do their part in helping the organization accomplish the goals, the organization does its part in providing the things they said that they were going to provide, and we all do that together, then we can achieve our wildly important goals for the year. And then what are the rewards based on that? So it becomes a two-way relationship, not a top-down plan. It also needs to be a tool for the team to hold leadership accountable. I love it when I walk into staff meetings and everyone's coming in with their binders and they know what KPIs we're going to report on because it's in their binders. We committed to it at the beginning of the year. We committed to hitting certain milestones and certain project deadlines. And they know that each and every month we're going to report on that, good, bad, or indifferent. It's their way to say, hey, wait a minute, you mentioned this KPI, or you said you guys were going to do this as a leadership team. We haven't seen this yet. It gives them a tool to hold leadership accountable so that they can engage inside the organization. And I know I've already said it several times, but keep it tangible. Keep it as something that they can touch and feel. They can see 4 years of operational plans at their desk for their tenure at the company, and they know that this is something they can count on each and every year, and that they can depend on leadership to follow that plan to the best of its ability. Okay, I want to go ahead and see if we have any questions so far, and just take a pause if you have any questions on the process, and then we're going to jump into the 7 messy techniques that you can go and really action as you leave today's webinar. Okay, doesn't look like any questions are coming in yet. So, so if you have questions, I will definitely come back to that panel as we go through it. So several comments are starting to come in, but let's jump into these techniques so that you can take action as you go back into your work world here in just a little bit. So number 1, making the process fit your organization. Okay, so think of it from a standpoint of continuity, compliance, and culture. Okay, kind of the 3 C's of the process. The language you're going to use in the organization, the tool sets you're going to use. One of the biggest mistakes that I see made is you go through this whole process and then you find a tool to manage the projects, and suddenly you're trying to change your process to fit the project management software. Don't do that. Make the software fit your process. Okay, you have the buy-in to the process created this plan, and you have the entire team executing towards it. Make sure that anything you do inside your organization fits your company's culture, your company's compliance standards, regulatory standards, and things of that nature, and keeps continuity between everything your different departments do and from one year to the next. Okay, that's really important. It provides stability in a very chaotic and unstable world. Number 2, plan for planning. I know this sounds silly, but I often hear, oh, I'm having an offsite in 4 weeks on these days, but we don't know what we're doing. Well, that's mistake number 1. You need to plan for planning. You need to determine, should it even be offsite or onsite? You need to have the strategic workshop, get buying into the process. You need to make sure that you have time to do the surveys and people can be thoughtful in their responses before getting into strategy. So being careful with the selection of days. In larger organizations where you might have to get together for like 4 days in order to get through all the different steps, I recommend 2 days up front going through all the feedback and then a break before the prioritizing and financial planning. This allows the really excited leadership team to get back into their real world, and 2 things happen. 1, Their optimism is going to decrease about how quickly they can get things done, so the plan becomes more realistic, therefore more executable. Two, it's kind of like when you're going to buy a new car and you never see it on the road and suddenly you buy this car and everyone else has it. The same thing happens with challenges that pop up during this process. They may hear something in feedback and say, it's probably a priority 3 or 4, not really that big of a deal. Like, yeah, we need to fix it, but not right now. Then they go back into real life for a couple of days and they see that challenge all over and they're like, oh my gosh, we have to fix that. And so it's great to really make that plan even more executable, to have a break. Offsite versus onsite. I've always been a proponent of offsites until about 2.5 years ago. I had a really large team that I was doing this with, and so we were at the boardroom inside the organization, which is floor-to-ceiling glass to where all the employees work. And so we did the first 2 days on site. The rest of it was actually planned for offsite. And I mean, we put phones in a basket. We were, head down and all in. And what happened is all the teams started to understand how hard we actually work during those strategic days. In their minds, we're off playing golf or, having drinks or doing something different than working. And in fact, for leaders, those are usually the most taxing days of our entire year. And so we actually moved everything on site and have continued to do it with that organization ever since. And so if you have the right setup, doing that on site, letting the rest of the team see that you're really head down and working. And again, if you're communicating about the process, they're going to give you that time and that respect and not interrupt you with the fires. Next, technique number 3, give voice to your entire organization. So the growth curve X-ray, a model for guiding your growth in a manageable and strategic way. Those organizational surveys, you really want to understand the culture of your organization, your employee net promoter score. Does it believe in what's going on with leadership in the company? Are they one with what it is that you're trying to achieve? And then the department surveys really kind of break down each department. So then you can start to see, do you have a subculture? Do you have one department that has a better culture than the organization? Or maybe it's the opposite. Do you have a manager that you've moved from a couple different departments and you start to see trends with that manager? Maybe they need a promotion. Maybe they need an exit. So it really kind of gives you information about what's going on in the individual departments in the organization versus the whole company. So it's very enlightening. I always love that piece too when you're going through the feedback and you have a manager that has a ton of continue behaviors, continue doing this, continue doing that, and other department leaders like, how are you achieving this in your department? And they start to learn and collaborate with each other at a whole different level and really put in some great best practices. Number 4, understand the behaviors your organization needs to stop, start, and continue. So again, big flip charts. And these are really behaviors. So they're not key projects or initiatives or things that need to get done, but they're like mindsets. And the continues are really important. Sometimes that's the shortest list because we tend to focus on what we need to stop and start doing. But those continues are really important for the staff to see because like, hey, we're going to continue this thought process. We noticed that you guys said it was good and we're going to keep it going. And sometimes there might be a thought process that the staff isn't aligned with, but they need to know that you're making a deliberate decision to continue it. So don't lose sight of those continues as you go through that piece of the process. Number 5, you need to, starting with what needs to be done and ending with critical numbers. Okay, it's your funnel. And so all of the different inputs need to be reviewed and sorted and organized in order to get to the point of what you can actually accomplish as an organization, what movements you can really make as a company within that strategic year. And then based on those movements, what are the results of the organization? I know the results are important. I am very results driven. I just believe we get to those desired results by listening to our employees and going through a process of really understanding what an organization needs to do. And then number 6, get excited and make the plan presentation special. I've wrapped bows around the binders. I've given gifts with the binders. It really just depends on budget, size of company, and things of that. At the end of the day, it's just important to have, a nice presentation to the team, have something tangible that they can take with them, Have a special meeting. It's not your typical staff meeting that month. It's a special meeting where it's face-to-face celebration of what you accomplished the previous year and what you're planning on accomplishing this year, and really thanking them for their feedback. And then deliberate delivery. And I know it's hard. I have some organizations that they have to do 3 meetings of this because they have to have constant phone coverage. And so by the 3rd meeting, talking about, the holiday schedule and why you made the decisions you made can be a little bit mundane, but it's the first time that team is hearing it. And you need to come with that same enthusiasm and that same deliberate delivery each and every time you present it, and each and every time you talk to the plan. The plan needs to stay alive, and it needs to stay special throughout the entire year in order for you to have that execution. Number 7, follow your cadence of connection without fail. You want to make sure that you're creating a manageable cadence. Again, during strategy, sometimes we can get really, really excited, and this is where an outside facilitator really helps to make sure we bring it down a level and we say, can we really adhere to this? There are still going to be times where you change that cadence throughout the year, but you intentionally change it. Make sure you're communicating that change to the entire organization, not just the people affected by the change, because the signal that it sends to the rest of the organization is that you're not following the plan. It's okay to make changes. It's okay for the plan to be fluid. It's not okay to not communicate it. So make sure you're communicating through your cadence and any changes for your cadence. For each meeting that you have, you want to make sure you're assigning a facilitator, someone who's in charge of the agenda, who's in charge of running the meeting, and I would also have a backup. So you make sure that that meeting keeps a similar rhythm each and every time the meeting occurs. Use technology to deliver what is missed. I will tell you, I struggled with this one as a leader inside an organization. We had, huddles every morning, and the idea was to get everybody, out of their office and at the huddle. But people were missing information. And you think if you're communicating this much, people are going to go back and they're going to tell their teams things. You're asking them to tell their teams. We even had team members who would miss huddle that would ask other team members for the information and still not get it. So we resorted to HR taking notes and putting it out through the Slack channel. Other organizations email it out every day. Staff meetings we record so that people that miss it can still attend. So just make sure that you can utilize different technologies to capture what you're doing face to face and really with that humanistic approach for the people that have missed it, because inevitably somebody's going to miss staff meeting each month, somebody's going to miss a huddle each week, and you want to make sure that they still have that information, so you're not assuming that everyone has heard what it is they need to hear unless they have access to it. So let's talk a little bit about outcomes and results, right? So we've talked about the process, we've talked about your 7 techniques, but so what? What can you really achieve? Here are just 4 things that we've been able to achieve with this process. We took a 40-person organization that was going through the recovery of the recession to hitting goals within 6 months of their planning session. They actually accomplished an entire ops plan within 6 months, and it was actually built out for a year just because of the alignment that it created, and it empowered everybody to move forward. We aligned a 1,000-person organization from really functioning like a family to an enterprise. Even as we went through planning, they were not budgeting to profit, and their CFO couldn't even fathom budgeting a profit line as they went through the process. And so building a profit plan and taking everybody through why those things were important was like revolutionary for that organization, because they had always ran like a family-run business, even though they had over 1,000 employees. In another organization, this process helped us double the customer base while doubling the gross profit and tripling the staff. It also really helped develop a productive and a cohesive culture at the same time. When you look at that type of hyper growth over a very short period of time, people really question, well, what was the culture? Is everybody stressed? And it actually had a very fun, cohesive, work hard, play hard culture that people just connected with and wanted to be a part of. In one other organization, we were able to accomplish a year's worth of priorities in 6 months by following the process. So it's a pretty common outcome the first year that someone goes through this process with an organization, because they have never had something that's this streamlined. So suddenly so much more gets accomplished than ever before, and then it starts to even out. And sometimes they just start adding more initiatives, but we like to kind of even out the pace a little bit and make sure that people have time for strategic thinking throughout the year in addition to the planning. At the end of today's webinar, as I mentioned, in the next 24 to 48 hours, we'll send out the recorded session. The operational plan that I had mentioned, I actually have a template for you. It's in the handouts now, but we'll send that as well. And then we have a PowerPoint deck for that strategic workshop and how you might take your leadership teams through that entire process. So again, that's also in the handouts, but it'll come to you via email as well. And so as we start to take in questions, I think most have just been comments versus questions coming in. Excuse me. I do want to just take a moment and mention, if this is something that's really appealing to you and really changing the focus of treating our employees as assets to treating our employees as humans and engaging with each and every one of them, this year's TTISI Con is just a really can't miss event as it relates to all of this. We'll be going through more with Messy Strategy, but that's just a minor component of the entire day. So that's Friday, January 11th, 2019. For the first time ever, we're opening that day up to the public. We've never done that before. This is an event we've held for 30 years. It's a 2-day event for all of our value-added associates, our partners within the industry, but that Friday is open to all leaders in any organization, and we're really going to discuss the people aspect of the business. And so if your business is relying on people, it's really a can't miss event. Let me go ahead and take a couple of questions. It sounds like you're talking about inside an organization. How do I relate to outside coaches? So this entire process is best if it's facilitated by an outside coach or consultant. And so really utilizing this process to go inside an organization. A couple of things happen there. As a coach or consultant, you really get to understand the inner workings of the organization at a deeper level. And so the process becomes a diagnostic in itself of other work that needs to be done inside the company that you potentially could help your clients with. How do these various processes work or be modified for smaller companies, less than 10 employees? So I've actually had the privilege lately of going through 6 different organizations that have 2 to 4 employees. Actually, a couple of them even had 1. And while some of the questions, talk about employees, and so that question might not necessarily relate, the process itself of really diving deep still applies. I've been very pleased with how that works. You don't have employee related things so much in the operational plan, and so you might have a 4 to 6 page operational plan instead of a 17 to 25 page operational plan. So the output looks a little bit different, but the process still applies. Is there a 6-month, 3-month process? I'm thinking it varies, but can you give us an idea of how much time for what type of company? So this is either you can call this a strategic planning process or you can call this an operationalizing process. And so it really can happen at any time of the year. If an organization already has a strategic plan in place, obviously you just need to make sure that those goals are leading towards that plan for the year, or are they open to adjusting it? What I recommend is that you do the full process once a year. Quarterly, you do about a 2.5-hour check-in, and semi-annually, you do a half day. And that's really regardless of the size of the company for those 2 time frames. The annual process at minimum is going to be a 1.5 days for your smaller companies. As you get into 100+ employees, then that's when the timeline is going to increase. What would you recommend charging for facilitating the process for the companies? That's really all over the map. I'll have my email address at the end if you want to email me some specific questions around that, and happy to answer that. Because sometimes this is part of a retainer if you're an outside consultant. Sometimes it's an inside talent development officer or someone who's running this process. A lot of organizations are hiring chief strategy officers as well. So it just really depends on your role as the consultant. Do you recommend using the balanced scorecard approach? I've used the balanced scorecard approach, and so if that's something that works well inside the organization, then absolutely. So that goes back to making the process, fit the organization. If that's something that they've already embraced, I wouldn't throw it out. You don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak. You want to make sure that you are, engaging with their current processes and then just fine tuning and moving things forward, so that you have that buy-in at the leadership level as well. So definitely can go right along with the operational plan. It would be, part of the scoreboard coming out of the operational plan. And so then one person was asking about the Ron Price quote from the beginning, and he said, all models are useful, but all models are broken. And so actually this brings me to our speaker lineup. We have Franz Johansson with the Medici Effect, Molly Fletcher, who's a sports agent, and then Ron Price, who is one of our esteemed value-added associates, an author and leadership specialist. So we have 6 other main stage speakers as well, but we're super excited to have them on the podium talking about innovation and transformation in absence of crisis. We all make changes when there's a crisis upon us, but what about doing that proactively? And so Molly's going to explore that topic with us. Franz is going to talk about convergence and innovation and that hockey stick growth that companies can continue to achieve if they just look at things from a different lens, and really looking at the intersection of polar opposites and how that creates your next level of innovation. And then Ron's going to talk about your people, and how you look at your people inside the organization, but maybe instead of looking at your people, how you might need to start looking at yourself. And I'm going to leave that little tidbit right there for what he's going to be talking to you about from our main podium. Some additional takeaways as you guys are pulling in some more questions. Making sure we're having the right people in the right positions, transparent company cultures, aligning with our strategic goals, making sure that we're, again, not only changing in crisis, but we're making positive changes throughout the entire journey of our businesses, bringing innovation through unique and diverse ideas and diversity of thought, and making sure that you can create urgency and drive within your employees, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to create stress and chaos. So you can learn more at ttisicon.com. As far as for Messy Strategy, if you have any questions, feel free to call or email me or LinkedIn. My information is up there, and we'll be talking more about this in person in January. See if there's any more questions coming in. Doesn't look like it. All right, well, thank you everyone for your time today. I enjoy talking about Messy Strategy, and I hope to see you all in January. Have a great day.